part of what I see as the problem is our failure, well, your failure as young people, to convert recognition by those wanting to have power that young people contain the numbers. So they are useful as vehicles to drive them into power. And we have played into that. I mean, look at civil society's approach to young people's participation. The major preoccupation is let's get them out to register to vote. It's always that. How do we get them on the voters' roll? How do we get them out to vote? When we talk about other things like representation or actually getting them into office, it's a conversation that happens later. It happens in hindsight. So I think part of the tragedy is the failure for young people to realize their capacity. So I'll give you an example. If you look at the War of Liberation in Zimbabwe, the people that crossed the border to go to war, how old were they? They were kids. I have an uncle who crossed when he was 18 or so. So those people went to war at a very young age because they wanted something. They didn't clamor for policy changes. They didn't say we want this, because nothing is ever given on a silver platter. This is about power. So if you're thinking that you can sit down around the table with people who are contesting for power to say we also want space on the table, I don't think you're going to get it. If you are, it's going to take a long period of time. So I think part of where the disconnect is, the failure by young people to actually realize how much power they wield. A lot of the politicians that are holding public office are not afraid of young people in terms of the consequences that may accrue to them if they don't respond to what young people want. We've never punished politicians for anything with our numbers. We evolve, we adapt to what these politicians say and do. And whatever we get, it's at their benevolence. In a lot of the cases, it's their benevolence. So do we come up with this? Oh, maybe, maybe not. And then we say thank you. And then as civil society at times we actually celebrate to say we've made inroads. But have we really made inroads? So I think there is that huge disconnect. And one of the other things that we were just discussing earlier is that at times we make too many assumptions as well about who a young person is and about what a young person actually wants. What a young person wants in this room may differ fundamentally with what a young person wants in Mutoko North. Whereas we want young people to actually sit in parliament. Have we ever asked ourselves if young people in Mutoko actually want to sit in parliament? And have they all said, yes, that's what they want? So the disconnect comes from making too many assumptions. The disconnect comes from not recognizing how much power we hold. So as much as we want to talk about frameworks, and I'd agree with the doc here, frameworks, systems around doing this, I think that's the whole concept of frameworks is at the tail end of winning this struggle. It's right at the end of it. The real struggle is about starting to influence political power and starting to attach a consequence to having politicians not respond to what young people want. The more politicians realize that if we are not responding to the demands coming from young people, there's a consequence. You'll find that they will become what? They will change their attitude. But it's not because we've written a policy down. It's because we've acted politically. So right from the onset, I think, and we've got 5 years to do this, I think the major emphasis of our interventions must relate to building the political capacity of young people, not to stand for public office, but to understand what their rights are, to use their numbers to influence what happens politically, to attach a consequence to politicians not responding to what they want. I mean, when you talk about the Nigerian case, and I've been privileged to work with colleagues that were running the Leave No Youth Behind campaign, and the whole policy conversations were at the tail end. It was about ensuring that you get into political parties and you're mobilizing young people to understand what their power is and to strategically use that power. Because you may have the numbers, but if you don't know how to strategically use it, it's going to get abused by those that think they can. So I think that you've got the disconnect from the failure to appreciate the power that young people actually have on their own. And secondly, because the preoccupation with overly assuming what must be. So I would close by saying I think the question of policies is important, but it's, in my view, at the tail end of the real struggle that young people must embrace, which is the struggle of occupying political space politically, and using that space to then drive what they want. So